Okay, just a reminder to everyone who has joined us just latterly that we are recording tonight's event, and it will be streamed on our respective Facebook pages over the next couple of days. So do make sure that you have switched your cameras off. So I am absolutely delighted to start this evening's In Conversation. So hello there and welcome. My name is Margaret Findlay and I'm the Learning and Public Programmes Manager at the City Art Centre in Edinburgh. A huge welcome to you wherever you are in the world tonight, and please do pop in the chat where you're joining from, because we'll be delighted to go through at the end and see where everybody was joining us from. I am absolutely delighted to be here tonight to introduce tonight's In Conversation, something that is personally really important to me because I'm possibly one of Robert's biggest fans, of his many growing fans. A celebration of a wonderful and brilliant photographer whose recognition is now rightly growing steadily, and I am so glad that the City Art Centre was so pivotal in this journey and that I was involved from the start. It's also an opportunity for Daryl from Edinburgh University, who's joining us tonight, to tell us about the exciting project that they've been working on to showcase Robert's photographs and to show the next step in Robert's legacy. Robert died at the age of 82 at the end of 2020, and thankfully Robert saw the start and steady acceleration in his quite rightly deserved success and growing recognition as one of the most talented photographers of post-war Britain. All the more remarkable because he remained throughout his years behind the camera an amateur photographer. It was great also that Robert managed to see the publication of his first book, Robert Blomfield, Edinburgh 1957 to 1966, published by Blue Coat Press last year. This publication will be the first of many, I'm sure, and we'll tell you more tonight where you can get this publication. Robert Blomfield, Edinburgh Street Photography, An Unseen Eye, ran from the 24th of November 2018 until the 17th of March 2019 at the City Art Centre, and I had the greatest pleasure in developing the events programme to accompany the exhibition and also led on the social media around the exhibition. Around a year before the exhibition opened, I started teasing some images over our social media. I knew at that point that we were onto something really special. During the exhibition, I was also privileged to get to know Robert's family, two of whom are here tonight. And I think it was just wonderful to see their belief in and passion and support for Robert's work so powerfully evident during the exhibition, and which only grows now with so much love and recognition from the public. It became so apparent that people wanted to see more and more of Robert's work, and through our social media we were able to show a much wider body of work than was possible in the exhibition. Robert has been compared to the great French greats like Robert Duano and Henri Cartier-Bresson, and also Scottish photographer Oscar Marzaroli. Tonight we have an In Conversation with two of Robert's three sons, Will the eldest and George in the middle, and we're also joined by Daryl Green, Head of Special Collections at the University of Edinburgh Library. I'm going to pass you to Daryl now, who's going to tell us about the role the University of Edinburgh Centre for Research Collection is taking in bringing more access to Robert's work in their forthcoming exhibition. Following Daryl, the four of us are going to each choose a series of photographs and give insight into why we love that particular photograph. And I've also got a few choices in there myself. So I will pass you now to Daryl, who's going to tell us a bit more.
Great. Thank you very much, Margaret. Good evening, everybody, and glad to see so many people here gathered to hear more about Robert's photography and Robert's legacy. For me, I guess there's a little bit of kind of personal biography mixed in with this as well. I've got a background in photography, family background in photography, but also professional background in curating photography and photo book collections. But I only came to my post in Edinburgh in March of 2020, so I was relatively unaware of the City Art Centre exhibition. But it just goes to show the testament of Robert's photography that within 3 years, there's going to be two major shows of his photography in the city. I think his photographs demand that attention and that level of interactivity with an audience. And in some ways, it's just a bit of a shame now that that Robert isn't with us to share in that kind of excitement around his photographs. But at least he got to experience that in the City Art Centre show. I was made aware of Robert's photographs through social media. So Margaret, the kind of social media campaign that you all ran, but then also the kind of continued legacy and the work that the family has done to promote Robert's work caught me. I remember the moment. So I follow, there's a collective of documentary photographers, Scottish documentary photographers called Document Scotland, and they do a great deal to promote both contemporary but also historic work. And they did I think they just tweeted a photo, or maybe it was just a retweet of one of Robert's photos. And I picked it up on Twitter, as you do, and it caught my eye, and I fell down the rabbit hole of robertblomfield.com. I just spent a long time with what was available on the website. I ordered the book, and it started to really catch my attention. What's interesting from my perspective is both the quality of the work, but also the time at which Robert was shooting as a student at the university, and capturing a time in university life and a time in the life of the city that we don't have a huge record of, photographic record of. So his photographs are both interesting from a documentary perspective, but also the artistic quality, and certainly the volume of the collection became quite apparent. I remember reaching out to just through the website and getting contacted by Will in late 2020. I think it was probably sometime autumn 2020, wasn't it, Will?
Yeah.
When I reached out just to kind of discuss, just open up a discussion with the family as to what the plans were with the physical collection. Knowing the way that some of these collections go, the physical manifestation of the collection is often the most difficult to work with, especially if you're dealing with lots and lots of negatives and slides, which the family certainly was, but also the prints as well. And we opened up a dialogue in terms of what's the future home and the future of working with the collection likely to be with the family. With Edinburgh University offering Edinburgh University as a potential home to deposit the collection in. So we started that discussion in October, November of 2020. You all were able to discuss things with the family, and it was decided late. It was after your father died. Is that right, Will?
Yeah.
That the Scottish portion of the collection would be deposited with the university, and then we began exploring what that meant in terms of the collection, because it's quite wide in its format, both in terms of your father's original enlargements that he was making, but also the vast quantity of film and slides, which are also part of the deposits at the university. So we've been working together over the past year and a half, and it was quite clear too that to mark this, homecoming in some ways of Robert's collection, that we really wanted to put on an exhibition to honor his work and also his time at the university and his experience of Edinburgh through the lens. And so, as a precursor to the new exhibition, I'm happy to join the brothers and Margaret this evening to talk about the photos. I've spent a lot of time with his photography, especially his Edinburgh work and his Scottish work, and have gotten to know the three brothers very well in that process. We will be opening a public exhibition of Robert's work. So Robert Blomfield, Student of Light, opens officially on the 6th of May. That's at the University of Edinburgh main library in George Square in our public exhibition gallery. And that'll run throughout the entire summertime. So that'll be up throughout the festival period and will come down on the 30th of September. And I'm really excited for that exhibition because it will bring some of I think George uses the term, some of the greatest hits back out, but also a whole slew of work that hasn't been seen in public exhibition before, including some of Robert's color work, which we'll see a glimpse of today as well.
Can I chip in as well?
Absolutely.
It's worth saying that Daryl's initial contact to the family was just before our dad died. And that's quite significant for me because he was able to pass comment on it. I broached the subject with him myself, and he was actually, he's always been very protective of his own work and quite careful not to kind of share it too widely. But when we discussed the idea with him, he was absolutely mad for it, and I was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised. So it was good to have that endorsement from him before he passed away. But even then, we needed to sort of do a bit of due diligence because it was a big deal for us to give any portion of the archive to any other party. So we did speak to someone else who'd gone through a similar process of donating their archive to an institution. And in speaking to Daryl, it just felt like it was the right person had turned up at the right time. It was very much like the City Art Centre showing the initial exhibition when they did. Everything just sort of fell into place at the right time. And we feel the same about this relationship with the university. It's sort of, we've met the right person at the right time to start this new chapter.
I think that's really important because you're dealing with a collection that has been so closed for so long and has really been dealt with by the family for a long period of time. I mean, both your mother and then also Robert's brother, Johnny, who's here in the audience today as well, has done so much to work with the collection and to provide context and to bring it out. And then latterly, the three sons, the three brothers have done a great deal of work. And it's an interesting moment when you hand over that collection to somebody else and you bring in another voice and you bring in another pair of eyes. And the whole process of curating the new exhibition has been quite fun because I've gotten to know not only the kind of the individual family members, but also some of the kind of artistic tastes or their artistic choices, and some of that being wrapped up in stories about their dad, which it all comes back to.
Yeah, and there'll be a bit more of that tonight, I think.
I think so. So with that, should we jump into the photos? Is that all right, Margaret? Mm-hmm. Well, you're on mute, Margaret.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, let's go, Will.
Okay. Hang on a sec. There he is. See that?
So I'm really privileged to be able to talk about a few of the photos tonight and why they're special to me. So this is Robert that I took on my own phone the night that the City Art Centre exhibition opened up in front of one of my favourite images, and it's of Teviot, Student Union Teviot Row House. Following the exhibition, the City Art Centre were gifted two of the artist photographs, and this was one of them, Student Union, Teviot Row House, and the Forth Road Bridge under construction in North Queensferry. And both of these are in our exhibition at the moment, new acquisitions at the City Art Centre, which is why we are hosting this in conversation. It's linking in with that exhibition. So I absolutely love this shop. I love everything about it. Its exploration of light, its composition, and the sort of swirling, enigmatic smoke. The beautiful people, it's like a kind of a late 1950s film set. I'm wearing my kind of engagement hat. It's a gift of a photo from a social history perspective to explore the fashion of the time, the mannerisms, and it tells us so much about that era. And I also recall a photo that Johnny, Robert's brother, and hi Johnny, I know that you're in the audience tonight. Johnny showed me very early on, which Robert took, of the steelworks at Rotherham in 1954 when Robert was just 16 years of age. And although this is a few years before his time in Edinburgh, in that photo we see his natural eye for atmospheric details and this interest in light and shade. So this artistic mastery depicting light and shade is not easy and shows a direct parallel with the great French street and humanist photographer Robert Doisneau. So I love this image, and I've got really precious memories of that photograph that I took of Robert that night at the City Art Centre in front of his work. And at that point, we didn't know that that was going to be one that we'd get at the City Art Centre, so it kind of makes that time all the more precious. And I'm just so privileged that I met him.
Yeah, and it's going to be what we're calling the hero shot, isn't it, Daryl, for the next exhibition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this photo is killer. I mean, Robert has got several examples of where he's just reading the light and the atmosphere in just the right way. I mean, this photo in particular is a perfect mix of composition and lights. I mean, here you've got not just kind of one wash of light, but light washing in through all three of those windows and the depth of focus. But the fact that it's the student union, the fact that room still exists, and in fact, for a new film that we're working on with Stu Edwards about Robert's work, we went to this room to film in that space, and it looks pretty much the same, bar some of the furniture. So it is both set in its own time, but timeless in many ways.
Margaret, has anyone spoken to you from Tevye about that photo?
No, nobody has. We know that a lot of people came forward that they recognise relatives or recognise themselves in the images, and one of the ones that I'm going to show a bit later is a classic example of that. But nobody's come forward to say that they were in this shot.
No, I'm just wondering about how it resonates with people there now, like whether there's any connection with the student union now and that photograph. Because am I right, Daryl, in thinking at that time women wouldn't have been allowed in the student union?
No, at that time women were allowed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I had a conversation with the current president of the student union, and she saw this photo and just was blown away by it, because in normal times, pre-COVID times, you could see exactly the same scene, without the cigarettes and the kind of cigarette smoke and things like that. But it's the guy in the duffel coat. People still wear duffel coats. It's fantastic.
Cool.
Should we move on?
Yeah.
Oh, you jumped one, Will.
Oh, sorry, there we are. This is one of mine. I've always liked this shot. And I think it's just because I can imagine being that boy swigging that drink, and that girl looking enviously on, and yeah,
that would have been me, Will.
Sorry,
that would have been me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the more you look into it, the more sort of things you see, and this is what I think my dad was so good at. There's little details, and I don't know whether this was deliberate or just a happy. Probably some of it's just a happy coincidence. But little things that's always fascinated me about this picture is the label on the Coca-Cola bottle there somehow mirrors the shape of the railings, and the shape of the steps is somehow mirrored by his hand knitted jumper. Little things like that. I think it's a fantastic shot, and I've always liked this. And then I started looking at his grubby little knees and his long socks and his sandals and stuff like this. It's yeah.
Well, Will, you've been looking at that photo a lot. I'm just seeing the lines and the reflection in the stairs and things, and the line in the bottle. It's pretty good, but you spend a lot of time with that photo.
I should get out more.
That's great.
Yeah, I do like it, and I know he really liked it. In fact, I stumbled across some video I shot of him. I was just chatting to him when he was confined to his hospital bed, and this was one of the pictures that we were chewing the fat over. So I know
that was one of the few photos that he did ever have printed.
Yeah,
elsewhere. That was in the British Journal of Photography, 1967.
Well, go ahead, Margaret. No, go on.
I was just going to say, there's quite a lot of people coming in the chat saying that they're pretty certain it's St Stephen's Street in Edinburgh.
Yeah. This time he was living in Stockbridge, and it's most of his photos of kids at this time period is around Stockbridge. I was going to say, I mean, we don't have any other of his photos of kids on the street, but he did such an interesting job. I mean, there's lots of photos of him where he's kind of caught a group of kids, and they've all turned around and he's taken their photo. But he's also done he also did a great job of catching kids just doing kid stuff. You know, whether it's snapping the elastic band at a cat or swinging on scaffolding, things like that. I mean, it's great. You know, kids, you know, a bit unaware that he's walking by. All right, so this is my first one. As you can imagine, from the university perspective, I got really interested in what he was capturing on the ground in the university. What I love about there's a number of things I love about this photo. So this is in the anatomy School of Anatomy, the Anatomy Lecture Theatre, which still exists today, largely with the same furniture. So what I love about this photo is that it brings Robert's street photography to the university. Most of the photographs that we have of his university life are, if it's not in the hospital, it's all just kind of casual social situations where here he's in a lecture theater, clearly before lecture is about to kick off. And what's great about this is, you know, he has captured a moment of kind of chaos before the stillness of a lecture, but people are aware of him. I mean, we see a lot of photos in his corpus where people are engaging with him and the camera at the same time, or kind of aware that he's taking a photo. And you can see also, I mean, what's great about this photo is just how many people are in focus, the depth of focus across the crowd all the way to the back. You can see folks that see him, you know, whether it's the lady in the front left-hand corner who's got her mouth a bit open, or the fella dead center who's given him a pretty strong death stare. It's just a great photo. There's focus lines everywhere. But from the university perspective too, it's capturing a classroom environment, which again, we don't have many examples of. And at a time, and specifically within the School of Medicine, which was a very diverse, I mean, diverse in terms of gender, in terms of race, in terms of international profile. And you can see that reflected in the crowd here. You've got women mixed in, you've got clearly a number of different students of different racial backgrounds in attendance, and it just reflects medicine at Edinburgh being taught in the 1960s, and we have very few of these. It's a really great photo.
Cool. George.
So this is one of mine. I just love the atmosphere of this shot. It could be San Francisco, but it's Edinburgh. And it could be a film poster. I don't know what it is about this shot, but it just is pure atmosphere. And then that's coupled with his eye for engineering detail, the arch of the bridge that he's highlighted. The scale that's given by the people in the shot. So he took this with a telescope as well, which I don't know. We think is it from North Queensferry side, I believe. Yeah, it's
North Queensferry.
North Queensferry. He's probably about a quarter of a mile away from the bridge, through a telescope, and he's still got it pin sharp. But if I could just sum it up with one word, it's atmosphere. And subheading engineering. And he almost studied engineering, and I think that's one of the things that's enabled him to take this shot, is his appreciation of that. And yeah, I don't know what else to say, but I just love it.
Well, you can say something about this.
Yeah. Well, that's him practicing to take that photo. So we got this telescope downstairs at the moment in my house, and it's about to be shipped up to Edinburgh. It's going to feature in the exhibit, and I don't know what the F number was on that, but it would have been pretty small. Mm-hmm. So again, that only adds to the appreciation of taking that photograph, because the amount of shake he would have got. He didn't often shoot really, really high ISOs, I don't think, but somehow he's pulled it off.
Oh, yeah, and that's what's, I mean, his telescope work, what's defining of that, maybe, well, if you can go back to the previous one, is the depth of focus you get when you're shooting down a tube like that. If you get it right and you can hold yourself still enough. I mean, the fact that you've got that in focus right the way, way back to where the bridge curves over, it's incredible.
He probably didn't. I don't know whether he would have had that on a mount, because looking at the tripod that comes with that, I can't see it being any use, quite frankly. It's not
a tripod. It would have sat.
I've got a tripod. I've got the tripod for that downstairs, but it's not particularly user friendly for taking that kind of photograph.
Maybe he just did what he's doing in that picture.
Exactly. So keeping that still, it must have been 0.002 of a second or something like that. I don't know. But there's a lot of things going on in that photograph in terms of technique, composition, and what he was trying to tell people about. It's a love affair with the bridge, I think.
Oh, he was in Edinburgh at a time when that bridge was going up, but I mean, he had as much love for that bridge as he did the rail bridge as well, right?
Yeah, he did. So yeah, that's why I chose that shot. I just love it. And I hope I think it's going up in the exhibition coming up.
One of yours, Margaret.
It is. So this is called Silhouettes and Shadows, and it's Edinburgh 1966. And this is down the Grassmarket. For me, this is where Robert goes beyond his amazing kind of empathy for the street kids and documentation of kind of a change in Edinburgh, and where his artistry, technical skill and ability to capture light and shades in a moment in time, it's where his legacy becomes a work of art for me. For me, this is like a Hitchcock film. And it's Robert, I think, at his most Cartier-Bresson and the French photographer's kind of famous decisive moment. The decisive moment is a precise moment of action. It's a split second of time that encapsulates all of the story shown in the image. And in his own words, the decisive moment is the simultaneous recognition in a fraction of a second of the significance of an event, as well as a precise organisation of forms which give the event its proper expression. I think that this is just an amazing capture. I don't know if it was luck or how long he stood to get that kind of merging of everything in one shot. I just absolutely love this.
The thing that's always struck me about this shot, Margaret, is how the lady's feet are sort of in unison, and they're both just about to touch down their right feet. That's always fascinated me about this shot, because it wouldn't be such a good shot if they weren't doing that.
Absolutely. And just the kind of almost mystery that is evoked in it, and the man who's just about to disappear around the corner, and just that amazing contrast of shadow and sunlight. I'm just in awe of the capture of this, and I'll always love it. It'll always be one of my favourites. And I know that in the exhibition, people absolutely loved this. People on social media, I think it was one of the shots that people kind of most commented on.
Well, I've always been a fan of this one. He did like a good silhouette.
He did.
He knew how to use them. It's the kind of shot that people would almost cheat at these days. They'd sit there, they'd find a background, and then they'd wait for the people to come but shoot away all day. But I don't think he really shot like that.
No.
He didn't cheat it.
He also, just going back to the previous photo, the conversation that I had when the three brothers were up in Edinburgh recently, is that it's interesting to kind of go through Robert's work chronologically and see how he learned to use the city, Edinburgh, to kind of frame his work, but also how light moves through Edinburgh is so iconic, and his photos tune into that so well. There's several instances where he's so great at framing up action or framing up a shot using the architecture and the way that roads are moving through the city, but also that low light, that low morning light, or more often for Robert's work, more low evening light. And I mean, this photo has all of it. It's got it all.
Nadia's actually saying that perhaps the man is actually coming and not going away, which is actually a good point. I've always thought he was going away, but looking closer at it, I'm not sure.
I think it's an optical illusion. It probably tells you about your own inner psyche, how you perceive it. Which you see first tells you who you are.
Yeah.
Nice and deep, Will.
Moving on. So yeah, this is one of mine. I only came across this recently. It's not a particularly attractive picture. It's not, it's a nuclear reactor. But what I like about it is the attitude that, my dad is displaying here, which is a characteristic of his entire life, of not really taking authority very seriously. So this sign explicitly prohibiting him taking a photograph, he takes a photograph of the sign and the thing that he's not meant to be taking photographs of at the same time. And I remember experiencing this myself when he came to an open day. I was working at BT and they had this open day for families, and he came armed as usual with his camera, and there were very clear signs saying no photography of any of this commercially sensitive equipment that we were showing off. And he proceeded to snap away. And until a security guard came up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, who are you with? And he pointed at me, and I was mortified with embarrassment. And this guy was like, well, you can't take any photos. So he put his camera down, and then as soon as this guy was out of view, he started taking photos again. And this was just what he was like. He just didn't, he was just curious, and if anything said don't go in here, then he'd be wondering why. So this photograph, although it's not particularly attractive, just reminds me of that aspect of his personality. So it really caught my eye.
It's earlier than I thought it was as well, actually. 59. It's the kind of shot he would have taken later on.
Yeah. Well, it's just because it's what. So our mum used to collect photos he'd taken in a sort of sub collection and call it the funnies, and he did sort of take more and more funnies later on in his career. But this is an early example, you might say.
All right. So this is an image that I've gotten to know as I was working through the collection shortlisting for the new exhibition at the university. And again, looking for that kind of university life. There's a number of photos that have come to light of the kind of social life of a student. And this photo is another example of just the right moment, the right time, the right place, and clearly, I mean, I was just watching comments from Johnny. The fact that he wasn't shooting with a motor drive meant that he had one shot to take this photo, and that's it. So he clearly had kind of scoped out what he wanted to do. I mean, here you've got this is the Union Canal, quite close to the rowing club, where the boathouse is, and at a point where you've got a bit of a viaduct. And the composition is just fantastic. So you've got the raised canal, you've got the rail going on underneath. The depth of field is super deep again. But again, that moment of the action in the rowers, but also the fellow riding along the I'm not a rower, I don't have the terminology. Fellow riding along with the boat. He's just captured at the right time in the right place. So it's another example of again that kind of knowing what he was doing, waiting for the right moment, and being well equipped to take a photo that is stellar.
So yeah, I've got a sequence of shots here where I think he's channeling some of the painters that he was interested in. This is taken over Edinburgh. I don't know if anyone knows where it's taken from, recognises the view. All I know is it's Edinburgh, and I'm pretty sure it's sunset and not sunrise. So I'm interested to hear people's take on that. But if we move to the second slide, Will, when I scanned, is it scrolling down? Mm-hmm. Here we are. As soon as I scanned, because this is one of the ones I scanned recently, it was a glass slide, and I knew it reminded me of something. And then it was this painting by Monet, and I know he was a fan of Monet, and he had a similar obsession with light and color, and I think that's one of the reasons why I immediately resonated with this photograph, because I used to talk to him about Monet. I would look at books of Monet with him. Went to visit there was a big exhibition in London about Monet. So that was the connection. It's a fairly recent uncover, that slide. We think it's around 1967. It's a glass mounted slide. But yeah, it speaks of his obsession with light, and the obsession with light fed into the title for the new exhibition, which is Student of Light. The next one, if we move on. So this is in his medical training days. Again, there's a connection with a painting, and when I was familiar with this photograph for quite some time, but as soon as I was looking at it through this lens of paintings, this one came to mind. Rembrandt, another one of his favorites in the art world. I don't know whether he was channeling it, but the composition is very similar. The angle that he's chosen to put himself on, never mind the fact that he chose to have a camera on him in the first place. But he could have been anywhere in this room. He didn't need to be at this particular angle, but he's chosen to frame these people. Dr. Matthews' hand is in exactly the same position, and his head as this. As the anatomy lesson of Mr. Nicholas Tulp. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it, but he definitely had an affinity with artists like Rembrandt and with Monet. And I think that on some level, it was feeding into the way he was composing some of his shots.
Do you want to say anything about our mums?
Well, yeah, and our mum was studying art history, so he was immersed in this world of not only photography and medicine, but art in the broader sense, and the analysis of art as well. So I can't help but think that there's an interplay there at the very least. And again, if we move on to the next shot, this reminded me of something as soon as I saw it. Again, this is one that I've scanned recently, and it's in London. I think possibly on the King's Road, but I'm not entirely sure. There was something about this lady that reminded me of a Renoir or a Manet. And then when I went looking, well, this is the closest I've come to finding an approximation. But again, it just reminded me of his affinity with painters, not just photographers, and the way his sympathy for their approach.
And George, there's quite a few people coming to suggest where the first image may be. So Craig Locker, some Lee saying that looks like the church in Slateford in the background, and somebody saying Dalry. So quite a few Dalry, quite a few people saying Dalry.
Are those chimneys still there? Because are they still around?
Can you go back to the image?
Here we are.
Any consensus, folks? All Edinburgh folk who are in where it might be? The Caledonian Brewery.
Well, that might help us when we label it up for the exhibition.
I
we know where it's
think
taken from.
Graham's just made a comment. If that might be Graham Gainey, who I know takes a lot of photographs in Edinburgh, saying that there's not many chimneys left like that in Edinburgh. Carlton Hill to Leith, but I think the domed building is confusing people. I don't think we can quite place the domed building. Anyway,
okay,
we shall wonder.
I just wanted to go back to this one to point out a couple of things that you might miss if you don't look a bit more closely. First is you can actually see our dad in the window, his reflection taking the picture.
Another thing that I like about this is the fact that she's dressed up to the nines, like she's waiting. I don't know whether she's waiting for a date or what, but the reflection again allows you to see this fairly rundown area that she's in. It doesn't look particularly attractive, but then she's got this amazing outfit on in the furs.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And the fact that they're filming the Italian Job in the background.
Yeah. It's so evocative. She's really got, she's got her makeup on. I don't know if it really comes across, but she's spent a lot of time doing her eyes. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I love this photo because I'm pretty sure it is a King's Road too, George. It looks a lot like the King's Road. It's a portrait, it's street photography, and it's a self-portrait all in one. I mean, you can see what's going on in the street. It's kind of a street scene that you would see along the King's Road. But yeah, the fact that it's got both the sitter and the taker in the image is great.
She's pointedly ignoring him as well.
Yeah, that too.
He got away with it.
Kind of like her.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of mine. Now, I haven't got too much to say about this other than I work for City of Edinburgh Council and we consult with the public all the time. Usually these days we do it by e-surveys and e-consultation. I just love that in 1964, City of Edinburgh Council had a lamppost competition in Princes Street Garden so that residents could choose which lamppost they would like the City of Edinburgh Council to administer in the city. I love the bemused gentleman who is walking through, just looking up in absolute amazement. And yeah, that's it really. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'd love to know which lamppost was chosen.
I was just going to ask that. Which one won?
No idea. I don't know if there's anybody in the audience that was around in Edinburgh in 1964 who actually remembers this and would possibly know which lamppost.
There's actually several shots of this exhibition. This is the one that we all sort of favour, but there are other.
They're all good, but this is the best.
Yeah,
it's the guy looking up at it that makes it.
Yeah, definitely.
And the lady who's just completely disinterested in the middle, who's just sauntering through as if it's an everyday occurrence in Edinburgh.
Something sort of War of the Worlds about it, I think.
I was going to say that. It does remind me of the tripods.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just love it.
This is one of mine. Going back to the bridges and his love affair with the bridges. But the thing I like about this one is it's a kind of precursor to when he started getting more and more into nature. And one thing that I think he did really well was he sort of juxtaposed nature with man-made structures. I've got another picture later on that has the same kind of theme. But I just love that this kind of Isambard Kingdom Brunel style bridge that when you get up close to it is just, awe-inspiring engineering. But it's kind of rendered into just another reed amongst the reeds of this picture. They just you have to kind of look twice to notice this bridge, this huge structure. And I think this is a kind of taste of things to come as to how he saw the world, started to move away from people and architecture and more towards nature. But this is it represents a transition for me, this picture.
I love it as well. we did have we were talking about this photograph the other day, me, Daryl, and Ed, and I was explaining to Daryl how for him it wasn't typical of his work, but for us as brothers, it strikes a chord because it does tell you where he's going, and those kind of photographs that emerged that we saw in the slideshows as we were, as children and teenagers. That was where he was going. That's where he ended up taking this kind of photograph where, nature, moving towards nature. And it's an early example of that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So moving back towards the people, what has come to light, especially in the last year, as the brothers have shared more of Robert's work on social media, on Insta and on Twitter and other places, is the kind of tip of the iceberg with Robert's color work. The focus of the exhibition in the City Art Centre was very much on the black and white work, and there was a few hints at some of the color work in a bit, but the quality of Robert's color work has come out of the good work of the family, and also as we prep for the exhibition to come at the university. The university, we will have a separate or a section specifically focused on Robert's color work. What's great is that there's several portraits or self-portraits of Robert on the streets, armed with 2 cameras, and you can only imagine. And in fact, we have proof that one of those cameras was loaded with color film and one with black and white, and he was snapping the same composition almost instantaneously in some instances. But you still get, in the best of his color photography, you still get his attention to light and to shadow and to architecture and to people and to composition. And this photo is just killer. I mean, one, it's this photo in some ways only could be taken in Edinburgh, and two, it's again that kind of, it has that timeless quality. You're seeing 2 older ladies having a chat, probably waiting for the bus or waiting to carry on, and he's just captured it at the right time, the light and the shadow, and also a nod to his own professional background as well, in front of one of the old surgeries. So it's you'll see a few color photos coming up, but in terms of his color people work, this is a fantastic composition.
Yeah, I love this.
This is another one of mine. So this is Snowstorm in the Meadows, and I love this because it is like a painting, and I think it's one of to follow on with what George was saying, like the snow paintings of Monet and Pissarro, the great Impressionist snow paintings, but also the American Impressionists. There was these great people caught in blizzards in New York City, and I just think this is, again, perfectly composed. I was really lucky to be gifted a print of my choice by the family after the exhibition finished. And I chose this one just because of the kind of painterly nature of it. And anybody walking through the Meadows is part of my daily commute. I live in the Borders, but I drive into Edinburgh and park and walk through the Meadows. Anybody who does that commute daily knows that you get caught in this sort of gale from all directions coming through the Meadows, and you're soaked to the skin in minutes. So it really kind of resonates with me, and yeah, I love this image, and I'm very fortunate to have it.
That's up in my living room too, Margaret.
Oh wow!
It's a goodie.
Yeah, this is one of mine, and again, it's not it's not the most amazing shot, but I like its simplicity, and I've again come across it recently, and it's this nature combining or even overtaking the man-made infrastructure. So I like it for that. I like it for its simplicity and the composition. It wouldn't be the same picture if it didn't have the skier in. But it also reminds me of my a couple of times I've been skiing in Scotland and experienced gale force winds and, you know, the kind of conditions that probably resulted in this pylon being covered in encrusted snow. So it reminds me of that. And it also just reminds me of our dad's sort of adventurous spirit. And he was a keen skier, not a very good skier, but a keen skier. And so it's got that kind of personal connection as well. It's, yeah, I just like the simplicity of it. It's sort of Ansel Adams in a way.
Mm. Looks cold.
Oh.
Yeah. Again, color work. So I think at the moment this is my favorite color work by Robert. Margaret's already talked a little bit about the decisive moments. I mean, for me, there's a lot going on here. And I'm even seeing something new that I hadn't seen a second ago. There's a lot here that talks about Robert's. That leaves me asking a few questions about Robert and how he worked on the street. You can see this alleyway, which, you know, is a typical pen that you would see in Edinburgh, and he has seen the light coming in. Yeah, it's very, very possibly Bread Street. He had a flattened Bread Street. The light that is cutting through. So you've got a frame within a frame. That pen's cut, you know, framing the family scene, but also that the light almost kind of perfectly bisecting the image at the end. You've got the family scenes, the people moving through the light, which is super important to see the action and to give it some gravity. But then also there's something I just literally saw this. So we've, especially George has told me a few times to look for the faces in his dad's photos. You know, the kind of inanimate objects, which because of whatever is on those objects, they have faces. And, you know, here I can see that, you know, the mouth and the eye of the window above the pens, and so there's a lot that's going on here. But in terms of, you know, how it makes me ask questions. You know, was Robert just walking by and grabbed this photo at just the right second? Or had he noticed the alleyway and noticed the light and was just, you know, did he camp out and wait for the right moment to take that photograph? There's a lot of questions I have that this photo has kind of pulled out for me.
So yeah, this is one of the photographs where when we had the exhibition at the City Art Centre, lots of people came forward with stories about who it was and recognising themselves or family members. And this old lady leaning in Edinburgh in 1965, there's quite a story to this lady. So at the City Art Centre exhibition, we can categorise the Edinburgh shots into changing and documenting a lost Edinburgh, and then of course the street kids, and then the artistic shots that we've all sort of talked about tonight. But the ones that I personally love are his views of the adults, and in particular the ladies of Edinburgh, some tender and quite sad, but some really humorous, but particularly the matriarchs of Edinburgh has captured the strength and resilience of these women who would not be seen out in town without their hats, their best handbags and their Sunday coats. And I think that we all had a granny or an auntie that we remember. This lady in particular, I've got quite a lot of information on her, and Will and George, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that her name was Lucia D'Agostino, who was Italian and came over to Scotland with her family in 1938 to seek a better life in troubled times, which is obviously highly symbolic of what's going on in the world at the moment. At the time of the photograph, Lucia was 77 and lived in Montgomery Street, just off Leith Walk. She still spoke very little English and seldom travelled far other than St Mary's Cathedral to attend Mass every day. This photo is near there, captured by Robert, and sadly she died quite near her home 3 years later after being knocked down by a car. But this image in particular I was sent poems that people were inspired, that just wrote stories or imagined this lady's story. And just looking at her standing here having a rest, and she's got her best handbag, her best Sunday shoes, and her hat on. And I just feel that her whole life story is etched on her face. And Robert has just kind of caught that split second of her story, and I just think it is so powerfully wonderful, and I think is one of my favourite shots of his Ladies of Edinburgh. Well, George, I don't know if you've got I got that story absolutely right or correct there, or if you want to correct me in any way. But
no, I think you summarised it well. Nailed it. I wouldn't attempt to pronounce her name better than you did either. So.
Yeah.
All right. So we've been talking a lot about influences, and I've gotten interested. I've had a few conversations with George and Ed specifically about, you know, what kind of magazines and what kind of books was their dad reading as a kid, as a student, and part of this. So one of my favorite pieces of work, photographic work, is Brassai's Paris at Night, Paris de Nuit. Which is, you know, this fantastic photo book where everything's taken at night, and the photographs are printed flush to the edge, so it kind of feels like the ink is dripping off of the pages. And when I saw this photo, I instantly saw Brassai. I instantly saw, you know, what your dad was looking at and taking reference from. And Brassai is about 15 years, is that right? 10 to 15 years before your dad's shooting. So he would have known the work, and he would have known that in Edinburgh you could get shots that you know, pulling off the stones and bringing in the stonework from the buildings and playing with the lights, that he could attempt something similar. This is one of the few shots. It's one of the few shots that we have at night, or that I've seen at least, of his experimenting at night. But it instantly resonated with me. You could see, you know, what he's taking inspiration from and what he was trying out and experimenting with on the street.
Pretty sure that's his car.
Is that right?
You think it's his?
Fantastic.
Well, he had a
Beetle, but
yeah, so it would make sense, because often you see his scooter parked in the background of some of the shots. Yeah. It makes sense.
Are we moving on?
No? I think this is the last one. It's kind of self-explanatory. We've got a lot of selfies of our dad. A lot of them he's encrusted in snow as well. So this is as good as any. But it's nice to finish on the artiste himself, and how he enjoyed himself out in the outdoors and immersed in nature and encrusted in snow.
Yeah. Stephen in the chat was asking if there's any other similar shots in the collection. I think he was asking about the previous photo. There are lots of, or a number of photos where Robert's playing around with the paving stones, and especially low light, you know, sunset, and playing around with kind of high contrast. And there's something about kind of repetition of very dark, very light, you know, bouncing off of, be it railings on fencing and gating, or be it stones. But there's very few that I've seen, and George and Will, you jump in here, but there's very few that I've seen where he's shooting at night.
No, well, there aren't many at night, and that shot is a little bit of an aberration. That's why it was in the previous exhibition, but me and Ed love it. I don't know whether it gained much traction with people who went there, but I've got it on my wall. I'm looking at it now. But it didn't seem typical of his work. It felt like we knew it was a good shot, but it didn't feel like that's really representative of him. And so we were unsure whether to put it in, but we liked it so much we did put it in. And I don't know whether that quality just is because it's at night or not. But it's a great shot nonetheless.
Yep.
Well, thank you everybody. Thanks to the three of you for your choices and your insight. So I would just like to open up questions. If anybody's got specific questions or memories of visiting the exhibition at the City Art Centre, or questions for Daryl about the forthcoming project at the university. There was a question there. Ian said that he finds it hard to comprehend how a medical student not only had time to take so many pictures, but also develop them. Do you want to come in on that, Will?
He was a busy man. I mean, it was all consuming. He was either studying medicine or taking pictures or developing them or sleeping, I guess, judged based on what we the evidence we've got, and it was incredibly time consuming. Anyone who's listening to this talk who knows anything about photography knows that shooting film and then developing the film and then printing the film or enlarging the film, it's complicated, it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's the reason we all carry digital cameras in our phones these days, because no one could be bothered with it. But the results, if you get it right, speak for themselves. And so it was a labour of love. Every single black and white image is a real labour of love. And I don't know how he found time to do it all, but he did.
And Catherine is just popping in the chat that Catherine was working at the City Art Centre when the exhibition opened, and every day was a pleasure, and people's reactions were amazing. Hi, Catherine. And actually, that was one of the most powerful things about my experience of the exhibition at the City Art Centre. Usually exhibitions are quite a passive experience. You maybe get a sole person or one or two people come in and they'll walk around the exhibition, they'll look at the work and they'll leave. But when we had Robert's exhibition, I've never witnessed, and I think Catherine will agree with me, sort of this shared experience of groups of people from Edinburgh coming in and actually leaving as friends. We would see people saying, I remember that, and do you remember this, and you lived in that street, and people would come together, and it was like a really powerful shared experience, and I've never witnessed anything like it in any exhibition at the City Art Centre. And actually I do think that a lot of these people will probably still be friends that actually met at that exhibition. And Daryl, I hope that you experience that when the exhibition opens up at the university, and I'm sure you will. I'm sure that there'll be more stories to come out and more stories to be told.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's already kind of showing some of these images to the university community has been really interesting, because it is both for those who were alumni of the university who are still around. They're quite evocative, but also to students who are studying at the university today, and especially having gone past through the past 2 years, where students have not been able to necessarily be on campus or kind of experience that campus life. It's given them a sense of place and a bit of grounding in what the university was and what it can be. There was a question in there about what the exhibition, or a bit more detail about the exhibition. So maybe I'll segue into that very quickly. The exhibition. So just again, the dates of the exhibition we're opening on the 6th of May and running throughout the summertime until the 30th of September. The exhibition will be in the university's main library public exhibition gallery. So that's in George Square, through the main entrance of the library and to the left. The anteroom, quite a large gallery space. We'll be exhibiting roughly 50 images of Robert's work, as well as some of the physical artifacts of his street photography, but also from his darkroom. And we have commissioned a new film from Stu Edwards, who produced the first film that was debuted at the same time as the City Art Centre exhibition. The exhibition's titled Robert Blomfield, Student of Light. And the focus there is really on three main aspects. One is his life as a student and the kind of student life that he was able to capture during his nearly decades in Edinburgh. There is a further focus on street photography, but more looking at his work with light and shadow. And some of the examples that we saw today bring some of that narrative out, is, you know, using the city to frame his work, using the unique lights that you get in Edinburgh to really enhance his photography and his skills. And then finally, colors. So there'll be a whole section of the exhibition devoted to his color work. So we'll have roughly a dozen of his color pieces on display in the university as well. We're also working with the various festivals in the city to install an external portion of the exhibition. So on George Square, on the railings in George Square, we're hoping to install an outdoor portion of the exhibition that will be up throughout the festival period as well. So watch the space, please. Please come and visit the exhibition when it's on, and there'll be a list of events being published soon. But yeah, I agree with you, Margaret. I mean, photography, when it's good, has the power to bring people together and to evoke all kinds of conversations and memories. And also, for what I'm hoping for is to inspire, Edinburgh students today, and to see, you know, this is the work of a medical student, as somebody commented, it's the work of a medical student who just had the artistic talent and the drive to really hone his talent down while he was a student. It's a wonderful story.
So I'm going to direct this next question to George, and it's actually making me chuckle, and it's from Gary Hamilton. Did your mother have time for his hobby? My wife often walks away bored, and I'm assuming that Gary is a photographer. So, yeah, tell us about that, George.
Short answer is yes. I think she did. I don't think she had much choice, but I think she genuinely enjoyed it for the most part. The journey of she was a great fan of his work, and she knew it was good. And she was, like, as we've alluded to, an art historian by training. So she knew a good picture when she saw it, and she was a great one for trying to get his work recognised. And yeah, she was a fan. I'm sure she had frustrations, especially when she was having to live around smelly chemicals and printing the work. But I think she fully embraced it. There obviously would have been frustrations down the line, like we all had when we were kids growing up. I think we were probably more frustrated by it than she was. Like when we were skiing down mountains, and then he would stop for half an hour to take a photo of whatever it was. That was a frustration. But I don't remember ever her being frustrated by it. There were other things that she get frustrated with, but photography probably wasn't one of them, actually.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't be here probably having this chat if it wasn't for her. She started this whole process of trying to get him recognition. I mean, if it was up to him, he would have gone to his grave with the boxes buried with him probably. But she just really believed in his work and started the process of digitizing in a very small way, but in a significant way, because it proved that he was of an analog generation and didn't really get digital and didn't understand it. And she didn't really either, but she kind of tried. And yeah, that's what started it all off. That was the nucleus of this whole project, really, was her initial attempts at scanning his work and showing it around people.
Document Scotland is asking, Daryl, how big is the Edinburgh acquisition? How many prints, negatives and transparencies will make up the archive?
Yeah, so the initial deposit from the family is all of the prints, or at least the majority of the prints from Robert's work in Scotland, which is 95% Edinburgh focused. There's bits of his trips up into the hills, and a few sessions in Glasgow as well. The print is numbering, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, about 800 or so prints that had been deposited, which are the original enlargements that Robert struck in his student digs. the film collection, so the entirety of the 35mm collection has been deposited with the university, and that is many rolls of 35mm. I'd put a finger on it, between
hundreds. It's thousands of shots, of which this is one of the main things that we're excited to find out about via the university's archiving, is what is in there.
Yeah,
because nobody knows yet.
Yeah, so that, I mean, this again, just kind of putting my finger in the air, it's probably between 600 and 900 rolls of film, something like that. But what's great and maybe problematic is that they are in the rolls that your dad developed them, so that they're kind of rolled up, and it's probably 24 exposure film, but with his own handwritten labels describing the dates or the month range, and also some of the subjects and things as well. So we've got a lot of contextual information that's on the negatives, and what we're very interested in, what we'll be opening up over the next probably the next couple of years, is getting into those negatives and scanning them and seeing just exactly the camera work that your dad did, and then there's the deposit of the color material as well. So there's about 250-300 color slides and transparencies that have been deposited as well. So it's a big collection. It's roughly 10 years worth of his work, all Scottish focus, with the films being a huge unknown in terms of what's there, and that's what makes it really quite exciting.
Just to put it out, a related thing about the rolls of film is he didn't do contact sheets, which most photographers would do. So that's what makes it significant to uncover what's in the negs, because we don't have a contact sheet for any of his photographs, which is unusual.
Yeah,
frustrating, but it also makes this element exciting.
Yeah, and there's some conservation to be done as well. I mean, the prints are in decent condition, but I mean, they were stored in print boxes in your dad's house for forever and a day, and so there will be some conservation work that needs to take place in order to make sure that the prints are housed and mounted correctly. Our aim is to be able to redigitize all of the prints and eventually work up a system to begin the long process of digitizing the negative archive as well.
Thank you. So there's quite a lot of comments, and I'm just trying to kind of pick out loads of people just saying how brilliant and memories and bonding at the exhibition. Graham's asking, obviously we've seen a lot of colour images tonight, which we didn't see that feature in your original book. Graham's asking if there's going to be a new book on the horizon.
Well,
good question. Possibly. We're weighing up our options about publications at the moment. I mean, we've all got day jobs, so this is something we do, in parallel with earning a living, and there's only so many plates we can spin at any one time. So there is the existing book, which currently is out of print but is coming back into print this month, I believe. So we'll let everybody know when that's available again to purchase. But as for a new book, we'd like to, but we're just so busy with other things, and whether it's another book just on Edinburgh or another book on Scotland, or indeed a book about all of his greatest hits in one album, the jury's out. So perhaps you could let us know what you think would go down well. I mean, we've talked a lot tonight about his Scottish work, but obviously there's just as many shots of London as there are of Edinburgh, indeed possibly more. So do we do a London book next? Or there's lots of questions that we're sort of wrestling with behind the scenes. But we'd be interested to know what people think who are tuning in tonight, what they'd like to see.
Lee is asking if there's any work to be done in identifying locations in Edinburgh, and that they are up for detective work, if there's any to be done.
I think, I mean, the answer is always yes. We were talking about that before we started up the conversation this evening, that in some cases, Robert was really good about recording where he was shooting, and that's both on the neg rolls, but also on the back of the enlargements. If he remembered, he would record where things were shot at. But also that the family has done a huge amount of work over the past 20, 25, 30 years, working on identifying where shots were taken and providing some of that context. I think as we embark on the journey with the university, the ultimate goal is to be able to provide a kind of catalogue raison of Robert's work, which you should be able to kind of search by, geographical place name, be it in the city you're out with, or by subject or subject type or whatever. So there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of that will. I mean, just this evening, I think we've learned at least 3 or 4 things about the photographs that we displayed this evening. So there's a lot of work, and we're going to need a lot of help over the next couple of years.
Okay. So I am going to have to wrap this up because we've gone a bit over time. I think we could just talk forever about all of this, and there will be other opportunities, and I'm sure that Daryl, you'll be organising some great events for us to join. So a little plea for me, if you could do a little review for us on our council Twitter, which is at Ed and Culture, and I'll pop that in the chat. And I'll tag in the other respective Twitter pages and anything that people post. So just a couple, oh wait a minute, I quickly got to ask this question. Are any of Robert's sons photographers?
Yeah, Ed is. I studied photography, and I've done some photography semi-professional over the years. Ed trained in English but ended up being a photographer, so go figure. But we're all keen amateurs or professionals at one level or another.
Okay, that is absolutely brilliant. So I think that just to finish off, first of all, I'd like to thank Daryl and Will and George for an absolutely brilliant event, and thank you for working with me on this and doing this as part of our new acquisitions programme at the moment. I am absolutely proud and privileged to have been there at the start of this journey, and I'm just really excited to see where you're all going to take it next. So I'd like to thank you all for an absolutely brilliant session tonight, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us from all over the place. It would be quite good if we finish off by quite a few people are asking about Stu's film and also where they can find out about the events, but also really for Will and George maybe to say a bit about your Patreon page and just some resources that people can go to find out more. If you can each maybe just say that, and we'll pop it in the chat as well so that people can find that. So we'll kind of finish off with that, but a huge thank you from me to absolutely everybody for joining us.
Sure. So first on Stu's film. So Stu's original film can be seen on the website on robertblomfield.com and also on Vimeo. And as we mentioned, we've commissioned a new film with Stu, which will debut at the exhibition and be made available online in due time as well. Events for the upcoming exhibition. So we'll be putting out a press release about the launch of the exhibition here in the next 2 weeks. And with that, we'll have a web page that will detail out the details of the event, the exhibition, but also populate the event schedule throughout the summer as well. So just keep your eyes out for that.
Yep. It's actually robertblomfield.co.uk, but
sorry.
So yeah, in terms of keeping abreast of what we're up to, I do social media for the photo project on our side. So the Robert Blomfield Photography Instagram, Facebook and Twitter page. Feel free to follow that if you're not already. You probably are if you've joined us on this. And George is our Patreon poster. Do you want to say anything about Patreon, George? How that works?
Well, Patreon is a thing that we run alongside our social media endeavors, just to highlight the highlights really, because I'm scanning them. I don't know if you see behind me, but I've got all these slides and I've got a big scanning machine there. So when I get time, I scan stuff in, and if there's something that catches our eye, or something we want to shout about, we'll put it on Patreon, and we try and post once or twice a week. And it's a way of another way of connecting with people, and they can support us if they feel so minded, to keep the whole show on the road, really.
Yeah, the patrons are sort of a behind the scenes pass, really. We put up pictures that George has discovered through his scanning, but we also, some of the kind of stories and just little anecdotes or thoughts that have occurred to us, or maybe events that are coming up, we put on there. So it's a little bit, it's a blog essentially with never been seen before photographs that get posted up every now and again.
Okay. Any last things anybody wants to say?
No. Thanks for everyone who's joined us tonight. It's been fun reminiscing.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys for hosting and joining.
Okay.